we were in Exodus the last 2 weeks, and we are jumping forward into Numbers this time. I want to kind of catch you up a little bit about what has happened in between. So we were at the beginning of Moses' story. Do you remember that last week? His mother had protected him for 3 months, could no longer protect him, sent him down the river. Eventually he was adopted by Pharaoh's daughter. Now, Moses has led the people out of Egypt. They have been freed from slavery. They have been in the wilderness for almost 40 years. Okay? We're at the very end of their time of wandering. And God has laid out some laws about what it means going into the promised land. God has given directions on how this land is to be divided. And it is divided through fathers and sons. God has said everyone gets the same amount, and if the father has died, their son gets that amount. But we are about to hear a story about a man who had no sons. So this is our story in Numbers 27, verses 1 through 11. The daughters of Zelophehad, Hefer's son, Gilead's grandson, Makar's great-grandson, Manasseh's great-great-grandson, belonging to the clan of Manasseh, son of Joseph, came forward. His daughters' names were Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. They stood before Moses, Eleazar the priest, the chiefs, and the entire community at the entrance of the meeting tent and said, "Our father died in the desert. He wasn't part of the community who gathered against the Lord with Korah's community. He died for his own sins, but he had no sons. Why should our father's name be taken away from his clan because he didn't have a son? Give us property among our father's brothers." Moses brought their case before the Lord. The Lord said to Moses, "Zelophehad's daughters are right in what they are saying. By all means, give them property as inheritance among their father's brothers. Hand over their father's inheritance to them. Speak to the Israelites and say, if a man dies and does not have a son, you must hand his inheritance over to his daughters. If he does not have a daughter, you will give his inheritance to his brothers. If he doesn't have any brothers, you should give his inheritance to his father's brothers. If his father had no brothers, you should give his inheritance to his nearest relative from his clan. He will take possession of it. This will be a regulation and a case law for the Israelites, as the Lord commanded Moses." The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. So, in this time, in the time of the Israelites, how one was remembered was through their family bonds. So as things were passed down, they remembered who their father was, who their grandfather was. We see that at the opening of this passage, right? He was so-and-so's son, grandson, great-grandson, great-great-grandson. This is how people were remembered. When they died, they continued to live through their descendants. If they were to not have sons, they would be erased from history books. Everything would go to their brothers. And then the only name that would be carried on is their brother's name, not theirs. And so for these 5 daughters, they recognized that without a brother, their father, their family, their lineage would be erased from the history books. It was as if their father had never lived to begin with. It's a pretty painful thought. In some Jewish traditions today, they have what they call the second death. The first death is when a person physically dies. The second death is when that person is no longer remembered or talked about. And the belief is that the second death is far worse than the first. These daughters were living this story. Their father was about to be erased from Israelite history. And they had a choice to make. They could accept this law that was literally handed down from God. Or they could try and fight. They could try and change it. They could speak boldly and truthfully and negotiate with powerful people to bring about justice. These 5 sisters did just that. They went not only before Moses, but before the priests and the elders and the whole community. And they calmly, with respect, spoke about what was unjust. Why should our father's name be taken away from his clan because he didn't have a son? These 5 daughters were spicy, right? We have some of the traits of spicy ones here. They speak boldly and truthfully. They negotiate with those in power. They have a deep need for justice. Not even justice for themselves here, justice for their father. They're not afraid to take up space, to be leaders and change makers. But these 5 sisters did so calmly, respectfully, through civil discourse, through what I like to call tact, the art of making a point without making an image. The art of making a point without making an image. That's what these 5 sisters did. In fact, they made this point so well that Moses took it to God. Moses thought their argument was so impressive. He didn't become their enemy. He became their friend and went before God to negotiate on their behalf, to lay their case before God. And God didn't get mad. God didn't yell, "How dare you question me?" God didn't smite them. God said, "They're right. They speak the truth. Let me change the entire law because they are right." Now, I grew up often believing that you did not question God. God is all-knowing, God is all-present, God is all-powerful, God is all. And you do not question God. But that is not the truth of the Bible. The truth of the Bible is that people question God all the time. Moses questioned God. Abraham questioned God. Mary questioned God. Sarah questioned God. The truth of the Bible is that people question God frequently. And oftentimes, not all the time, oftentimes it resulted in God learning a new way. It resulted in God finding a new way to do something. Now, I'm not saying God was wrong, because we don't like to say that. And I'm not saying God made a mistake, because we don't say that either, I know. But when you know better, you can do better. God was a learner. God desired to learn from God's creation. God desired to grow in relationship together. These 5 spicy sisters helped God be more just. They helped God realize there was a better way. They did so by being bold and honest, by being willing to negotiate with the powerful, all because they needed to see justice happen. Oftentimes, we think of spicy, or I think of spicy, as being rude, as being disrespectful. But the truth is that what it really is fighting for justice. And sometimes, when we point out what's wrong, people take offense. They get mad and they get angry. Sometimes it's because they feel guilt or shame. Sometimes it's because they want all the power and control. When somebody points out what's wrong to us, we have these same options to react as. We can react with guilt and shame and anger. We can react by saying, "You're right. I know better. Now I can do better." How we react often comes down to how people present it to us. These 5 sisters presented it calmly, with respect, peacefully, civilly, with tact. They made their point without making an enemy. When I was in seminary, I had a colleague, he's a pastor in Iowa still, and he would introduce me to people. This is Alex. She's one of those feminists, but not one of the angry ones. And I can tell you, he introduced me this way multiple times. This is Alex. She's one of those feminists, but not one of the angry ones. I like to think that I get that from Noah and her sisters. I believe in justice with tact. Now, I'll be the first to admit that sometimes that's not possible. Sometimes it is not possible. But I also will be the first to admit you catch more flies with honey. I will be the first to admit that hearts are changed by love, not badgering. I want to be remembered as someone who fought for justice, yes. But I want to be remembered as someone who fought for justice with love and grace. Because when we offer love and grace as we fight for justice, we see laws change. We see people change. We see hearts change. But it starts in our daily lives. It starts with our neighbor who we disagree with. Can I show them love and justice? Can I show them compassion and grace? Can I have tact with them? It starts with our pastor, who we don't agree with. It starts with our children who we think are messing up. Every day as I clocked in at Hy-Vee for 4 years, I read that song, Tact, the art of making a point without making an image. I think that's what our world needs right now. We just talked about President Trump and the shooting that took place there. A few months ago, it was a shooting as we celebrated the home team in Kansas City. Almost a year ago, we lost the art of love and compassion. We've lost the art of tact. Individually and as a society. Noah and her sisters fought to be remembered. What will we be remembered for? For speaking truth with love? Or for hatred and violence?